Hello and welcome to Into the Abyss with special guest Nathan. He is the specialist, quote unquote, of the Utah UFO Fest. He is the founder and he is a photographer. He's had many different shots of all sorts of things. So please tune in, and here's your guest, Trent Clarno. How's it going, guys? All right, so here we have Nathan. He is the founder of the Utah UFO Fest, which hopefully, if everything still is going well, will be starting when again?
June 16th, 17th, and 18th.
Okay. That's after the Roswell Festival too, I believe, right?
Nope.
Or is that before? That should be fun. Both should be fun, I think.
Roswell Festival happens on July 4th.
That's right. So
Independence Day.
Please tell the viewers and people that are going to be watching on YouTube, tell them what you do, tell them tell them what you do, like how you started off in this, like what major experience sort of brought you to the idea of UFOs and aliens and that kind of stuff, like to help the disclosure of them type thing.
Okay. I've been a national parks tour guide, take people around the Grand Circle since 2006 roughly. Lived in the Grand Canyon for a couple of years out on the Arizona Strip, which is a corner of the Arizona that is just northwest of Grand Canyon, but is cut off from the rest of the state by the Grand Canyon. So it's a strip of land that's about 5,000 miles of dirt roads. I lived out there in a facility that was about 86 miles away from the nearest oiled road or telephone pole. National Geographic actually described the location as one of the last frontiers in the lower 48 states because it was so sparsely populated. They called it the bed of the Americas. So I lived out there in isolation. We flew people in from Vegas on a remote airstrip out there, and I would take people down into the Grand Canyon. So I started my tourism career in that. I've been in places where you can find bits of pottery all over the ground and old corn cobs from the ancient days of the ancient Puebloans, the Anasazi and stuff. So I went from doing that to doing national parks tours around the Grand Circle of the American Southwest here. And the Grand Circle roughly encompasses the Four Corners region. It does stretch clear as far as Santa Fe and, goes up there around Chaco and Chaco Canyon National Monument, Mesa Verde. It goes up into Colorado. So I've been traveling all over the Southwest. This past summer, I completed a 6,000 miles road trip along U.S.-Mexican border. I went from Southern California down to the bottom of Texas, going down through Big Bend, and I was doing a Borderlands trip working as a photographer. So I've kept my eyes on the skies the entire time, but unfortunately I didn't see anything. I was on the road for about 65 days on that trip, and I didn't see anything in the skies except for when I was in Marfa. And I told you earlier today, Trent, that I've had 3 experiences, and I'm pretty well trained, not trained, I'm pretty experienced at recognizing most natural phenomenon or airplanes or military craft or helicopters out in the middle of nowhere, because I grew up working with my grandparents who ran a mining company here in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was always out in the hills. I worked on some cattle ranches and some sheep ranches, and did a lot of sheep herding in the summertime too. And I've seen all sorts of stuff in the sky, but I usually was able to identify what I had seen and stuff. And I usually go out to Area 51, Rachel, Nevada area, because I like going out there as a photographer. If you've never been out there, it's one of those really isolated places in the United States. They say America's loneliest highways go through the Great Basin of Nevada. And if you go out on Highway 375 out past Rachel, It's actually referred to as America's extraterrestrial highway out there in Nevada because it straddles the northern boundary of the Nevada test site out by Area 51. And that's one of my favorite places to go out and photograph. So I've been going out there for well over 10 years, sometimes 2 or 3 times a year, maybe more. But I'd never seen anything out there until 2013. And I did see what I could describe as orange orbs. And no, they were not red flag exercises out there that they talk about the military conducting out there. I saw orbs that maneuvered. They came from behind a mountain and they went down into a valley. And I watched these and they maneuvered and they acted very intelligently. And I actually managed to capture some footage of these guys. But, you know, when they were close up, I couldn't get footage of them. I had a wide angle lens on a Nikon, and it wasn't the kind of recording device that was suitable for trying to document something like that. And I wasn't expecting to see anything out there, actually. And I had my friend Nate Lamb, who's a nursing student at Southern Utah University, out there with me. And, you know, he witnessed this too. And we know for a fact that these were not flares. We know for a fact that it was some sort of orb. It could have been maybe a military hologram or something, but they were close enough when they first appeared. They were close enough that I could see through them. And it's hard to judge the size of them, but I would say at least the size of a house. And they were very translucent. You could see through them. They were like perfect spheres, and they maneuvered. And so I managed to capture some footage, you know, but it took me about 25 minutes of trying to chase these things around, trying to see if I could get them on my camera actually before I was able to actually catch anything. And the video footage will never do justice to the experience of watching it with your own naked eyes. It's really hard to show video evidence because there's so much that the video didn't capture that you see with your naked eyes and stuff. So that was my first experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
When did you that answers the question. That's definitely a very profound experience for sure. Without a doubt. Was that like the first time that you actually sort of like started to recognize that there might be something going on out there? Like speaking about Area 51 and stuff, do you think that was like the first time that you recognized that there was something sketchy going on out there, or
let me tell you something,
or just from past research?
This kind of well, I already knew a little bit about the history. I knew about J-Rod. I don't know if you ever heard of J-Rod. I've researched a lot of the past regarding Bob Lazar and George Knapp out of Vegas, exposing the Area 51 using Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar claimed to be a former scientist working out there on reversed engineered flying discs that had crashed down in Arizona or New Mexico, and they had been retrieved and taken out there. And he claimed that he worked on some of these discs, and he actually watched one perform out there when they were testing one. So he went public with that back in the late 80s, and a lot of people had a hard time believing his story. I tend to think that either Bob Lazar was duped or he's telling the truth. And I know he's telling the truth because I don't think he's lying. He may have lied about it.
No, I don't think he's lying either, to be honest with you. Bob Lazar's story is that he's basically told the entire world is there's too much detail and too much thought into what he's telling.
He's never deviated from his story. His story has never changed.
That's true.
Credentials are questionable, but so are Edward Snowden's. Edward Snowden lied about his credentials, but doesn't make his contribution to society as a whistleblower any less significant. And I like the way George Knapp compares both Bob Lazar being kind of like a cosmic whistleblower to Edward Snowden, who blew the whistle on the NSA. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff regarding that. And I got to listen to Bob Lazar in a Q&A session down at 2015 UFO Congress down in Fountain Hills, Arizona last February. And, that was the first time he's made like a public appearance like that in front of a large crowd in well over 25 years. So, I mean, it was kind of a treat, but, I've always been kind of interested in Area 51, based on that history. And there's a lot of stuff out there. And if you like photography too, it's a great place. But something you might find interesting here, and maybe I shouldn't mention this on a podcast or on the radio or anything, but about 6 months after that incident, we decided to start planning this festival. And we actually had a federal agent show up at my house here. He claimed to be researching the background of one of my friends who had been friends with about 4 or 5 years prior. And this guy claimed that he was checking, investigating his friendships to make sure he was, clean to get a security clearance to work for the federal government. So this friend of mine, I know him pretty good, he was going into a government job. But what was really curious is this federal agent that showed up, I asked to see his credentials, and he said he was with the FIS. And I had never heard of the FIS, but it stands for the Federal Investigative Service. And I invited him into my home, and we visited for about a half an hour. He spent about 15 minutes talking about my friend. And then he started talking about how I go out to Area 51, and he wanted to know about my friend and I going out to Area 51 and what we had seen out there. So, he was just asking me probing questions that led to this discussion. And for about the next 2 hours, he proceeded to try to convince me that what I had seen out in Nevada was nothing more than orange flares. And I know flares don't.
Bullshit.
I know. And so he almost had me convinced, or he tried to convince me that, I didn't see what I had seen out there. And I started asking him some probing questions, and he admitted that he was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base just outside of Vegas. So he came here to this house where I'm at right now and wanted to ask me some questions. He was really curious about our UFO festival as well. I was like, what are you guys doing here? And I said, oh, we're just going to get some researchers here. I've recently got involved with, for about last year and a half, I've been involved with Mufon, Utah State Mufon. It didn't take much to become one of their investigators. I'm not supposed to talk about that on the air though, being, you sign some kind of agreement with Mufon. You have to usually get their permission before you represent them or anything like that. But I'm just, I was working with Mufon because I wanted to get them involved with our festival down here. So, they're a great bunch of folks to work with. They've been very supportive and helping us with the festival here. So I've networked with both Arizona Mufon and in Utah Mufon. So, but other than that, we've got a nonprofit down here for the UFO Fest known as Anomaly Conservatory. That's our name. But we look into the UFO phenomenon, but we're coming at this more from a sociological perspective. Like how can this topic, how can this phenomenon, how does it affect society? How does it affect our social institutions? A lot of organizations are coming at this from a physical scientific point of view, but we're kind of coming at this more from my education as a sociologist is where I get my education. And so we're, when we're developing the strategy for our organization, we're looking at everything from the actual phenomenon, how it affects society, and we're also looking at, protecting and kind of promoting the folklore, not just the research, but the folklore and the mythology that's tied to the phenomenon. I mean, there's a cultural significance to the UFO phenomenon here in the Southwest. And I think you would agree with me on this, Trent, that the Southwest wouldn't be Southwest culture without the UFO streak in our culture.
Agreed. Definitely. It's definitely a major play with our culture. You come down to the Southwest, you'll see three main things. You'll see UFOs, you'll see Indian pottery and Indian made stuff in general, and then you'll see I'm trying to think of a third thing now because I remember hearing the third thing the other day.
If you go down to the old plaza there in Albuquerque, you know where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The historical plaza. If you go into some of the shops there, most of the T-shirts that they have in the tourism shops there have the cow sign, like the open range cattle sign with the UFO above it. So
yeah, well that and
Breaking Bad now.
Breaking Bad is a big thing too now. So
yeah,
that's a big cultural thing out here now. Like everybody has like a Breaking Bad bumper sticker and everything like that. It's pretty funny. So let's sort of go off on a little, I don't know if you would call it tangent, but what are your feelings about the FBI releasing their so-and-so UFO files? Did you look into any of
I hadn't actually noticed that. I did notice that the CIA was releasing information.
Was it the CIA?
Yeah, it was what I noticed was the Central Intelligence Agency.
It was the CIA. Yeah, it was the CIA.
Yeah, what I find to be much more surprising actually is was the new season of the X-Files, especially the first episode, where it's almost like they almost brought about disclosure in one episode. Mm-hmm. You know, there was, how many seasons of X-Files were there where they barely would let you know anything of the mystery, and all of a sudden in one episode they spill the beans on Roswell and everything. And I can't help but think, X-Files is based around the folklore, and that's what they say is the mythology of the topic. But what was funny is I've done a lot of research, and I've read a lot of books. I've gone through a lot of qualitative data. I've read a lot of stories, talked to a lot of people. And in that one episode, it mirrored basically what I understand about the research. I mean, it didn't BS anything in that episode. There was no BS. It was like, wow, these guys may have just brought about disclosure in the popular TV show that they brought back.
That's a lot of people's theory. I've been reading online and hearing through the conspiracy theorists and stuff. They think that that's like a big major ploy into the first. We're making our first few steps into disclosure because the CIA just released theirs. And X-Files, now let me just point this out. So how far-fetched would it be in the final episode? Because you watched the final episode, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how far-fetched would it be if that actually happened? If they actually did, like, implant, like, quote-unquote alien DNA in certain people and stuff like that? How far-fetched would that really be?
Well, I don't know if that's so far-fetched. I believe, I don't know if that's true in per se the X-Files. I don't know if you know this, but I'm LDS. I'm Mormon, which means I'm kind of there's a stigma in our community in our Mormon culture that kind of, like, I've been often told by other members of the church, how can you believe in this stuff and be a Mormon? How can you be LDS and believe in this stuff? I says, look at the Pearl of Great Price. We have this set of scriptures called the Pearl of Great Price. It talks about how the Creator created other worlds without number with people on them. And I'm not getting into religion or anything here, but what I'm going to mention is, let's just go back to the science. I think, they just recently discovered, the physicists with some of the most recent physics revelations is that the Big Bang may have never occurred, and that the universe may have always been here. And so if that's the case and there's no beginning, then what would keep civilizations that are infinitely that much older than we are from ever visiting us? I mean, we've already probably been, we're probably just a waypoint, on an intergalactic GPS. And, people think it's hard to imagine that we're being visited. That, you look back to Galileo's time. Galileo was charged with heresy for suggesting that the earth revolved around the sun. at the time, the religious dogma said otherwise, and people were taught otherwise. And, those charges against him weren't dropped till 3 centuries after his death. And so it's like that flat earth mentality, right? You have all these people that are alive today that are skeptical that we're being visited by intelligent life, but it's a fact that it may be the reality, and it's really a common reality. It's just we haven't ever opened our minds to it. And, I wouldn't be surprised if God used extraterrestrials as tools to create humanity or interfere or intercept in our evolution.
I think
maybe
we're
God,
ignorant to think that we're
yep.
the only people in the universe. I think it's ignorant in general to think that we are the only intelligent life in the universe. There's no way there's no way. Really, honestly, there's no way.
And I do think that with the Edward Snowden revelations, with his whistleblowing, we really wanted to have a UFO Fest in the home state of the NSA. Right here in our state of Utah, we have the data center, the NSA data center, which is spying on American citizens. And it seems like since we've been planning this fest, me and my brother and some other people helping us with the fest, we've gotten some opposition. Some of those strangest opposition is trying to prevent us from having this type of festival in the state, because maybe it might inspire people to start asking some hard questions. I mean, when you look at ufology, you're asking hard questions. It's like
no matter what, when it comes to ufology, look at how much skepticism, look at how much black projects, look at all this stuff that basically our government has said, no, never mind. You know what? That was a weather balloon. Now let's sort of travel south and let's go to Roswell for a second. Wait a minute. They said, the first newspaper said it was a UFO. The second said, oh, sorry, our bad, weather balloon.
You know what you should do sometimes is you should go up to Taos Pueblo and go talk to some of the Pueblo people up in Taos Village. They have, they might tell you interesting stuff about the history of UFOs or extraterrestrials in New Mexico. New Mexico has a deep and rich history that's like, it has indigenous roots over there. I'm going to you guys have a UFO conference coming up in New Mexico there that I think if you can make it up there, you should head up there. But it's the Dulce base conference that the Hickory Apaches are putting on up on the Apache reservation up there. They've got it going. I believe it's the 15th of May. I'll probably be at that one, to just network with people there. But that's a pretty legit conference because, the Hickory is their nonprofit organization up there is putting it on. So it's kind of cool, but that's a chance. Like I want to hear what indigenous people, like what native people here in the Southwest have to say about the subject. There's been a lot of New Agers that kind of, I don't have anything against New Age people.
No.
I just think in places like Sedona and other places here in the American Southwest, culture, a lot of these people, a lot of non-Indian people have engaged in some form of cultural theft or another and have, exploited these cultures, and the New Age movement's kind of usurped this topic. And so it's interesting that if we could kind of educate ourselves about that and how Indian people are getting exploited, how these cultures are getting exploited, maybe, what I would like to see is more people coming out of the woodwork that are the First Nations people here in the Southwest that have something to say about this topic if they're interested in it. That's one reason why I'm going to the
stories that have been
conference.
passed down to them, like stories that have been passed down through the ages and through the generations, that, it's not just folklore. I say this, if the story is longer than 5 generations or longer, basically, I think that there's some legitimacy to it, because there's no way that you're going to sit here and tell the grandson of, let's say, White Feather, for example. I'm not trying to piss anybody off, but let's say you have the grandson of White Feather. He passes down a story that White Feather told him about, something, and but it stays consistent. That's what needs to matter. And that's what I'd be interested in, is because not only some of the stories that I've heard, but some of the quote unquote, what they would say is urban legends, and basically like know if those are how much of the stories have changed, because urban legends, there always is some truth to them, but they've been so changed over time that it just turns into mumbo jumbo and it just goes way over your head. You just think, oh, it's BS. There's no way,
Hey, yeah, let me address one of these questions here. I noticed one of these questions in the chat here. This person, Lister's mate, said, "Have you ever looked into the possibility of alien life as demonic activity?" Do you mind if I comment on that?
Go for it.
Okay, what I would say is, as a researcher, as a sociologist, I'm not completely a sociologist yet. I have 2 more math classes to get out of the way before I'm graduated. But I'm done with my capstone study, and I, as a religious person too, as a spiritual person, I'm I'll admit right now, I'm inactive in the church. I don't go to church. So, but I wish I wish I was going to church. I'm just not. I need to work on that. I'm kind of on the fence right now. But anyways, I don't rule out the possibility of these grays, what they call Zeta grays, or some of these other entities, as being possible demons. Now, I'm not going to say that every other abduction experience that people have had are exclusively demonic activity. If you're a basic Christian, the Bible teaches that Lucifer or Satan can appear as an angel of light, which means he can even mimic a good person or an angel. I don't think that every abduction story and every abduction experience is necessarily tied to demonic activity. I don't believe that. That would explain away. That wouldn't explain bodies at down flying saucers. It wouldn't describe physical beings that have been removed from these objects that have crashed, that may have been brought down by the federal government. It doesn't explain that. It doesn't explain those people who were in the government who have sworn under oath and testified under oath that that's in fact what they saw or witnessed. And so it doesn't support that. So, but you have to look at everything. As a researcher, I would have to acknowledge that some things could be related to demonic activity, but I think that's just a phenomenon in of itself that's kind of mimicking or copying an actual phenomenon. So I don't think that everything regarding alien abduction is demonic activity. So
let me ask this, if per se, because there's a couple cases that reminds me of the possible demonic activity type deal that we're talking about. I know of one case that basically had sleep that's all, folks. Just kidding. Paralysis, and the person woke up and saw quote unquote reptilians. Now, a lot of people say that there's different species of aliens. You got the grays, the talls, the reptilians, the insectoids, so on and so forth.
They're all up there in Dulce at that underground base up there.
I wouldn't doubt it at all.
You have all of them over there in New Mexico.
They're all over the place, and we got skinwalkers too, so which aren't really related, but that's a whole different topic upon itself. But
you're not supposed to talk about those guys. You don't want anything. You're not supposed to talk about your travel plans after dark. You don't talk about what you're doing after dark, because those evil forces can hear you. So you're not supposed to drive across the reservation after dark. That's considered to be bad juju. You don't pick up hitchhikers after the sun goes down out on the res, because maybe someone who had passed away off the side of the road there, and it might be a skinwalker. And those are real stories. People have had those experiences, and I think the place I've spent most of my time as a bilagana, you know what that is, right?
No.
Bilagana is Anglo Nation in the Navajo language. That's Anglo people in the Navajo language. But Bilagana, doesn't matter who you are. Everyone can be affected by those forces of evil. And, some people, I've talked to people on the res who don't necessarily believe that skinwalking is a bad thing. In fact, they said it was used to help people back in the old days. But today it's mostly evil, the evil that has that knowledge and stuff. But I've had a few of my own skinwalker experiences out in the reservation, and these are things that defy science and my own understanding and my own logic. And, I found myself in a place where I was photographing something that shouldn't be photographed. And we were visited by an unkind spirit, and I learned a lesson, and I deleted those photos off of my camera. And there were some of the most beautiful pictures I had ever taken, but I had to delete those pictures out of respect. And so, we were in an area that I shouldn't probably have been, and I shouldn't be photographing that area. And I deleted those photos out of respect. And so, I've had those experiences out on the res, and, I can't explain what it was, but it taught me a lesson, and it taught me how to be respected. It taught me to learn how to respect, basically, how to learn respect, and how to, respect someone else's culture that's not mine and stuff.
So have you ever been on Highway 666?
Yes, I broke down on Highway 666. I was coming from the Navajo Nation Fair. I had about 4 ton of alabaster, carving alabaster, and I was heading up to Kirtland, New Mexico from Window Rock, which is the Navajo Nation capital. I was going up there, and a water pump went out on my truck, and so I got stranded. And it was on the same night that they were having this big corn concert out there, out on the net. If you've never been to the Navajo Nation Fair, it's quite a cultural experience, because you'll see 10,000-15,000 Navajos in one location. So you'll never see that many Indians anywhere like at the Navajo Nation Fair. I'm sure the Gathering of Nations powwow is probably the same in Albuquerque. I've never been to that, but yeah, I got stranded out there, and I had a few friends of mine that were out there on the res. They came down and rescued me in my trailer rock. And so if I didn't have good friends out there, I don't know what I would do. But,
that's one damn good thing is you got to have good connections everywhere, no matter what, because you never know. You got to have good connections anywhere. So
I'm the kind of Bilagana that Indian people seem to like my friends. They seem to think I'm an okay guy. So I'm not interested in exploiting culture, or, and I'm happy to be who I am and stuff. But I understand their humor, and I like pulling jokes on them, using their own jokes against them once in a while. So
have you heard of the experiences and the things that people have reported out on Highway 666?
Not really, but I've been up and down it, and I've heard that it has a reputation, and I've heard a lot of people killed from drunk drivers out there, but I've heard some stories that friends have shared with me out there, but other than that, not a whole lot.
Okay. I was just curious if you've ever drove in there and had an experience or something like that. So
I think where most of the experiences I've had, the stretch of highway that I would be hesitant to travel across after dark would be the stretch of highway between Page and Flagstaff, the old Highway 89 going down through there.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, I grew up going out across the Navajo Nation. Like, when I first got my driver's license, I would go out there driving at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, just because it was kind of a thrill driving across the res in the middle of the night, just going out across the Hopi mesas and stuff. But, my friends kind of, after that little Skinwalker experience that I had was over by the Beast Eye Badlands, which is up by Kirtland. I don't know if you know where Kirtland, New Mexico is.
Yeah.
Kirtland. It was up there. And after that, I listened to my buddy, and he said, listen, you got to quit going out there on the res at night. You got to quit talking about your travel plans. Don't talk about them after the sun goes down, you know, just because the evil can hear you. You're empowering the evil when you do that. And you're not supposed to talk about, you're not really supposed to talk about skinwalkers, I guess, but you know what? It's good storytelling, and everyone I've run into, they like to tell me skinwalker stories. So I don't know how true that taboo is, if it's a taboo at all.
Well, I don't know if it's taboo much either, but it's definitely, there's definitely something to it. There's definitely, I've on myself, I've had a skinwalker experience, and that was more or less intriguing, but it wasn't the extent to yours. What I saw was, I was actually up at the St. James Hotel up in Cimarron, and let's just put it this way. That was not the experience I was looking for, because I've heard of many different skinwalker experiences, but me and my buddy went outside, and we were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden we heard a wolf howl, but it wasn't like a wolf. It was more or less like, I can't explain it. I really can't. Like, it sounded like a wolf, but it wasn't. Like, I know that sounds sort of like I'm counteracting myself there, but it was weird. It was, and I've heard wolves howl before and stuff. So we look over to where we're looking, and all of a sudden we see out of the tree brush, we see a wolf about, let's see, about give or take 4.5 feet tall, and piercing red eyes and black. That moment, I was like, that's got to be a skinwalker. I don't know what that is, but that's got to be a skinwalker or something.
Could have been Bigfoot.
Unnatural, but it looked like a wolf. That's what was weird. It looked like the snout and everything, and had a wolf look completely. So we were sort of dumbfounded.
Yeah, sorry.
So
keep going.
But I
was going to add a footnote, but keep going. I'll shut up.
It was really just interesting in general to have an experience like that. So,
well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you what you think of this. You know, you have spiritual people, and you have religious people, and then you have secular people, and people who base their judgments completely on science and physical evidence, right? I think what's important is that we keep open minds when we're, when I became an investigator that studies UFOs and all that, I couldn't help but chuckle because of the taboo and the stigma tied to the subject. But people who have had these experiences, I'm not interested in laughing at their experiences. I'm very open-minded and very accepting of people's visions, abduction experiences, ghost encounters, whatever you want to call the experiences that people have had. They're very powerful experiences, and in secular society, those people are going to be questioned. Their intellect is going to be questioned. Their mental capacity is going to be questioned, and it's really unfortunate because that's a cultural conditioning that we as Westerners are accustomed to. Let's say and I'm just telling you my personal experience here as an outsider to other cultures, but I've visited and have a lot of friendships, and I've networked with a lot of people, Indian people here in the Southwest. When I tell my experiences to my friends, I don't, like, if I go out, if I'm out in Kirtland and I'm just talking to friends and I share my experiences that I had, they're not a laughing matter. These people that I know, like say for example, the Navajo people, they're like the people that I know, they don't laugh at this stuff and they don't ridicule it. And I tend to believe that that's a Western, that's a Western mentality. That's a Western outlook.
Definitely. I can totally agree with you on that one, because you're saying that, that's sort of a Westerner type deal. East Coast. Let's sort of say East Coast. They're more of the tourists. They're more of the adventurous. We have been adventurous our entire life. We did not one little instance did one little bit of adventure, but you have like East Coast people are more. They're not as adventurous as we are, but they'll get that adventurous little stick up their butt and they'll be like, okay, let's go type deal. But if you live out here, it's like you're constantly wanting to go, go, go. And all these stories that people are telling you, it seems like a lot of people are open-minded. They're not completely closed-minded. I've met a couple closed-minded people, and those people are extremely hard to talk to in general with anything, because if they're closed-minded, they're just like, nope, 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 you're full of it, you know? And it was just it's one of those extremely interesting moments, because when you're trying to compare Easterners and Westerners, there's complete difference, and our culture is completely different. It's really weird.
Well, think about this. We look at this phenomenon. I'm just throwing out an idea here. I'm not saying it's fact or carved in stone, but here in Western culture, or here in the Southwest, we're relative like the Anglo nation. Let's make a joke. I don't like using the word white people. I just think white people, black people. I don't like using words like that. I say, if I have to, I say, I'm not trying to be politically correct here either. I think Anglo is a good word to describe non-Indian people. But here, Anglos came into the Southwest, and they stumble across this subject matter like it's some kind of mystery, and they just discovered it, right? But what happens if, culturally speaking, these things had a place amongst cultures here in the Southwest, and they had their own interpretations of them, and that's the way they understood the reality and the existence here, and the environment. But we come across and see this stuff, and it's like, oh, this is a mystery. This is the paranormal. Let's put this into a nice tidy box and call it paranormal. Then all of a sudden, we're mystified. It's like,
That's the truth.
But yeah, but
a lot of people sit there and be mystified. I mean, honestly, in the paranormal field, because both of us are in the paranormal field without a shadow of a doubt, because it's not normal. You have people that will look at us like we're completely nut jobs. But here's the thing: the experiences that we experience, the research that we do, the science that we do, the photographs that we do, the videos, so on and so forth. I could keep listing, but I'm not going to, because it's pointless. Because you're going to have some people that are going to be like total ignorant to the idea. And then you're going to have people that are going to completely agree with both of us. And then you're going to have people that are going to be in the middle that aren't going to really care. But I've met all sorts of people. I've met closed-minded, neutral people. I've met people that are completely open to the idea, but won't tackle the subject, which is really weird. And then I've met open-minded people that don't really care to talk about it, but they acknowledge it, type thing.
Yeah.
The society once, I mean, in the past decade in general, let's per se, basically in the past decade, we've all paranormal investigators, ufologists, ghost hunters, and Bigfoot hunters. Truthfully, we in the past 10 to 20 years, we've made such great advances with technology, with photographs. We've come close to a lot of mysterious things that we can't explain. And the scientists that are telling us that we're nut jobs, or were telling us that we're nut jobs, they're opening their eyes a little bit.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever do you read a lot of books?
Yeah.
Out of curiosity. I would recommend, if you're interested in what it is I'm talking about regarding the paranormal, or just things of a spiritual nature, maybe even. I'm reading this comment by Lister Mate here. I'm constantly looking into the comment services. I know that I'm interested in the paranormal and things associated with it, because it's a way for me to get validity and clarity to a higher power.
Yeah.
Now, I think a big problem with our society, our secular society today, is that we stop believing in something bigger than ourselves, whether that be God or anything like ghosts or anything. I mean, anything that requires a little bit of faith, maybe,
A
in
little bit of
order
faith
for those things.
thinking that causes us to think, especially when we have
Well,
that
I think
experience when we're out in the field. We know our stuff. We know what an airplane looks like. We know what flares look like. Yet,
maybe some things do not manifest themselves. Some intelligences. I'm going to call them intelligences. You say Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, whatever you want to call them. I tend to recognize all those things as higher forms of intelligence. And, these things tend to appear, for me at least, like when I seen those orange orbs out in Nevada that maneuvered, those things behaved intelligently. And so for me, I kind of had a little faith there, and I kind of had an open mind and a belief in it somewhat before I had this manifestation. Now, I'm not saying these things manifested themselves as a result of my belief, but I tend to believe that these things can be a manifestation of a higher power. And when I was looking at these orange orbs out in Nevada, you could call them UFOs. They didn't look like anything you could ride in. They were completely translucent.
okay, so what about? Wait a minute. What about this? I'm gonna throw a theory in at you and see what you think. So these translucent orange balls of light, could they have been interdimensional vehicles? Maybe.
Well, I tend to look at I like what George Knapp says when he was studying the Sherman Ranch up in near Vernal. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, the hunt for the Skinwalker.
Mm-hmm.
It's been misdubbed Skinwalker Ranch up there by Vernal, but they've seen all sorts of stuff like that whole area. The property was purchased by Bigelow Aerospace out of Vegas, and there had been a history of orb sightings, blue orbs, cattle mutilations, floating RVs that would float above trees that were like unidentified flying objects, oversized wolves, Bigfoot. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that happened there, but it all seems related. And so, in that case, there's a lot of crazy theories going around, and a lot of people have different hypotheses about what it might be. But like George Knapp said, maybe these places are kind of like wrinkles in time, where
Wrinkles or maybe portals.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I'm
like
talking about
interdimensional portals to
interdimensional portals
different
where
worlds that
we live in a multiverse. It's a multiverse.
I believe Area 51. I believe the grounds of Area 51 could possibly be the same thing as Skinwalker Ranch. Same with Stonehenge. The area around Stonehenge. There's a place called the Ram Inn, and that place is there's connections there because I know of one ghost hunting crew that went there, and basically what had happened is that they caught a spirit, the same spirit, and you could tell because it came in very clear, like me and you are talking right now, sort of thing, and it had the same voice and same everything, and I forget what they were responding to, but it's just really intriguing because I think without a shadow of a doubt, there's portals on this earth. Now, I don't know if it has to coincide with the ley lines or anything like that, but I think within the near future is in maybe 30 years or so, I think we are going to see some sort of advance where we're going to unlock those and we're going to be able to see those portals for what they are. Just like I think the Bermuda Triangle is, I think that could be a portal there. I think the Alaskan Triangle could be a portal too, because there's lots of UFO sightings, there's lots of big sightings,
and Dulce, New Mexico.
And Dulce, I think honestly, I think there's portals all over the place. We just got to once we figure out that they're there and everything, I think truthfully, I think the government's already found this out, but they're trying to keep it down low. They're trying to keep all their black projects and stuff. I mean,
listen, Edward Snowden,
Hitler and his crew were big into the occult and big into UFOs and stuff. Actually, they were trying to make their own UFO, and they were looking into religious objects. They were all over the place with the occult too. And they were interested in ghosts. They were interested in demons. I mean, but most of the papers for their research is gone. It's been destroyed because they didn't want that information getting into the hands of the wrong people type thing, you know? So this has been going on for years, you know? So I won't be surprised if the government already knows how to get those portals open and all this other stuff.
I was driving up I was up in Los Alamos on one of my photo shoots, and I never been to the laboratories there before. So I went through the gates, and I probably looked pretty suspicious because I had alien stickers on my car. And I go up to the gates, and I asked them if there was a museum there at the Los Alamos laboratories. And the guy was kind of cold with me. He was a little cold-shouldered, and he said I needed to turn around and go back into town because they didn't have anything there for me and stuff. So I go back into Los Alamos, and I'd never been there before, so I didn't know what to expect. And I'm kind of the guy that likes to go nosing around federal installations, and it's probably not a very brilliant thing for me to be doing because
either one of us are, because I'll do the same thing every now and then. So
I
like to explore abandoned buildings, ghost towns. You know, I'll sort of get a little close. Now, I know one of my buddies told me a story when he was out four-wheeling south of Kirkland Air Force Base. He was just four-wheeling, and he's four-wheeled out there before. And then one day, two black four-wheeler SUV things came up and basically stopped them in their tracks. M16s pointed at him and said, "You need to turn your ass around or else we will shoot." He turned his ass around and tucked his tail between his legs and ran away. Because, I mean, hell, I'd do the same thing. I mean, if I've gone to the same place over and over, I mean, what are they trying to hide out there? You know, I think there's some suspicious stuff going on here. I think there's suspicious stuff, without a doubt, going on in Dulce. I think there's suspicious stuff in Roswell still. I think.
Well, listen, I was there at Los Alamos, and I went back into town, and then I realized I needed to go down to Hema Springs, right? Because I was on my way down the Pueblo down there. I have some friends down there, and I'd never been to Hema Springs before through that side of Santa Fe. So I had to go down to the Valdez Caldera and all that. And in order for me to get to Hema Springs, I had to go back to that gate. So I had on Google Maps Hema Springs. I went back to that gate, and that same guard was there, and he was really suspicious of me. He said, "Do not make any left turns. You go straight to Hema Springs." I says, "I will, I promise." And the road that goes to Hema Springs actually turns left, right? Because I could see it on Google Maps, but there was all these left turns. And I did something really stupid. I made the wrong left turn. And I wound up in a restricted area in Los Alamos Laboratories. And I had two different vehicles that came right down on top of me. And these guys had machine guns right pointed at my vehicle and right at my face. And I didn't even see where these guys came out from. They just came out of nowhere. And they were right on top of me. And luckily, they saw I showed them my Google Maps. I said, "I'm just trying to get to Hema Springs." They looked at Google Maps, and sure enough, he must be telling the truth because it says Hema Springs right there on Google Maps. So they let me off the hook and stuff. And I got back on the road.
If I was them, I would have been like, "Let me be nice to this guy. Let me show the way so he doesn't screw up, so we don't have the other crews keep doing the same thing. So every 3 miles, he'll make the wrong left turn." Be like, "No, damn it." So we'll just escort him to Hema Springs so that way he gets there safely without it.
I made it on my own. But I had showed up there. I had showed up there in Los Alamos because I was just enamored with that secret installation. I heard so much stuff about the Serpo project, or I know it's just a lot of stories and stuff, but it's like just the possibility that they may be involved with some sort of alien technology there and figuring out extraterrestrial languages there and linguistics. It's just like, this is kind of cool stuff. It was like, if you're kind of a UFO enthusiast, just kind of chasing it around a little bit, wanting to learn more about these areas. I tell people you can't learn about a culture but from reading books. You got to go to those places. You got to go to these
poke
places
around
if you're
and
interested
actually
in
get a gun pointed to your face and experience this shit on hand. Be like, hey,
yes, exactly,
guys, how's it going? Sorry, I made the wrong left turn.
Yeah, and so I won't forget that experience. Those are part of the New Mexico. I think New Mexico is truly the land of enchantment because, you have the culture and you have all these secret military installations. You guys are lucky. You got Sandia Labs and you got the White Sands Missile Range, and you have Roswell, for crying out loud. How can you have how can you be any more lucky than that? I mean, we're trying to drum up some sort of importance over here in Utah, but I mean, we've got a lot of cool things happening here in Utah, but I love New Mexico.
Southwest in general is beautiful. We're actually coming up here to an hour. That hour went fairly quick. So, what do you think about Alaska? Like the reports coming out of Alaska, the abduction reports and stuff like that of missing persons. Have you done research into that or no?
Well, let's put it into perspective here. In Utah, I didn't have a particular interest in cattle mutilations, right? I was kind of more interested in people's maybe abduction stories or what they've seen in the sky. And I gotta quit saying sorry. But the interesting thing is we went on the radio station, the local radio station here, talking about the UFO Fest, and we were only supposed to be at the radio station for about 20 minutes to kind of share our agenda with what we were planning on doing for the festival. So we were here on a local talk radio station, and the most interesting thing happened. They decided to take some callers from the local community. So people started calling in. And I live in a town where I'd say the large majority of the economy is either tourism or cattle ranching. So we are a major cattle ranching industry here. I don't know if you heard about what's going on with the BLM and the Bundys up in Oregon. Did you hear about that? Okay, those guys are from my hometown here. Ryan Bundy is from Cedar City here. So this is like kind of like a hotbed politically, but we were on the radio here and we had ranchers calling in from Iron County around here saying that they were dealing with mutilated cows. People shared their stories and they've had quite a few cattle mutilations here, and that completely surprised me because I didn't think that kind of stuff was going on in Iron County, and to hear people calling in on the radio and for me to be completely uninformed by that made me really curious because, maybe there's a reason why we're doing a UFO Fest here. Maybe it's to generate dialogue and get people talking about that phenomenon because we live here, like I live here, and it's a Mormon community, and maybe people don't talk about this stuff because of that LDS culture. Maybe they're a little bit more, closed-minded to the idea of this phenomenon because they don't understand what it is. But ranchers know the difference. I know a lot of ranchers, and they're not stupid. Ranchers know the difference between a predator kill and something that looks completely different, right? And so most of the eyewitnesses that seen stings in the skies around here or have seen cows that have been mutilated, they're ranchers, they're people that are outdoors cutting alfalfa in the middle of the night and they see something in the sky. So that's the kind of feedback we've gotten since we've been organizing this festival. So
that's good that hey, at least you're getting positive feedback. At least you're not still you're getting positive and you're getting negative, which is a good thing because that proves that you're doing your job correctly. And hopefully, I'm hoping that the UFO Fest goes without a hitch from here on out. Like there's no more hitches.
you brought up Alaska here, and you know, Alaska is a really remote place, and there's like I didn't think Utah was that unique, but we get stories like this coming out of Southern Utah, and I think this phenomenon, whatever it is much more widespread than people realize.
Mm-hmm.
If they just look at the evidence and look for the smoke, they can find the smoke. It's there.
Yeah, without a doubt, it definitely is. You just gotta. Here's the thing: skeptics gotta open their eyes. They have to at some point, because there's gonna come to a point when we're gonna have a major event happen, and this major event is gonna be completely unexplainable, and everybody's gonna look at us like, "Holy crap, you're right!" But we tried to warn you guys. We tried to say, "Hey, there's gonna be something. We just don't know what," and that's coming. That's just like an example. And so some of the people are way too skeptical. They're too hard-headed to sit there and try and soak in some of the information that we're trying to tell them. But then
but you know what? Let me put things into perspective with skepticism here. People are going to be skeptic no matter what.
Exactly.
You can't convince. You could capture amazing footage. Listen, when I first saw those two things, when I first saw that first orange orb out in Nevada, I was really concerned with capturing evidence. But I was going through this transition phase. I think it's really important for people to hear this real quick. I went through a transition phase there where I was suspecting that there was something out there, to having it confirmed to me that what I was seeing was actually real, and that thousands of other people who had that same experience at that same teachable moment went through that transition as well, where they were no longer just believing in something based on faith or wondering what, just wanting to believe, to having something confirmed with their own eyes and stuff. And what's trippy for my life, and you said you had some experiences too, but I had two more encounters after that, one in 2014 and another one in 2015 down in Texas. I was out in West Texas. I had one happen up in Dulce, and then I had a third experience in Texas, and the one up in Dulce was very close. It was, the orange orbs were pretty far away in Nevada, but what I experienced in Dulce was close up, and that's something I'm looking forward to sharing when I go up there in May. I'm going to go network with people up there and go tell them what I had seen on our way to Indian Market in Santa Fe. And so I had those experiences myself, and you just once it's like you get over that fence. And I didn't see a need. I know this is going to sound painful to you, but I didn't see a need to document the experience in Dulce. I didn't see a need to document. By the time I got down to West Texas and I had seen what I'd seen out in West Texas, I was chuckling, because I was thinking to myself, I am not going to document this. You know why? Because I know it's real, and people don't have to believe it. I'm totally cool with that. And no matter how much you document it, people are not going to believe you. And
exactly.
You know what's real when you've seen it.
Yeah, there's just certain things that when you experience it, you don't need proof. You know what? Because it's that satisfaction. You get you're almost like you're being picked up, and you can hear the angels going, "Ah," type deal. It's like your own glory moment. You're in your own glory because you're having this experience, and you're sort of so caught up in that glory that sometimes even you forget to take a picture. But when I have my experiences, I like to try and capture something. But if it's
okay.
too amazing,
you want to do that.
If it's too amazing, like it's like jaw-dropping type thing, like the whole thing with the wolf, I was sort of dumbfounded. And I was like, what? Like I was caught off guard. I was enjoying the moment and enjoying the paranormal moment, so, and that's what I think you're talking about, right? You're sort of saying enjoying
think about this. Think about this. You're like, did you ever think that maybe documenting some of these things or trying to capture proof of them is kind of like exploiting them in a way? Maybe some of these things, like if you were to look at it maybe culturally, I'm not saying this has anything to do with indigenous culture, by the way, this is just my personal opinion, but historically speaking, what happens if it would be sacrilegious to record something like that. What if these things are only meant for your own eyes, for you to see, and by putting it on tape or trying to capture proof of it in some way is just vanity, pure vanity, or maybe it is maybe what we call, it's kind of like in Western culture, you're not just an artist. You have to be a musician, or you have to draw, or you have to be a photographer. What if you just want to be an artist and you don't want to be squeezed into any of those paradigms? Same with, we're dubbing something paranormal that is partly part of the natural world, and it's like, why squeeze it into something like that? That's secular society. I tend to think what we need to do is we need to look at the bigger picture, and we need to maybe contemplate the idea that perhaps this is just part of our natural world. And like I said, these are just our little world is just a waypoint in our intergalactic type of GPS system, and things come and go and they stop off here on our planet. And we're one of those pit stops in the universe or in the galaxy and stuff. I don't know.
Coming up to your left, pit stop Earth.
That's exactly what I think it is.
Make sure you take a piss, shit, and eat. Just don't eat the humans, because they'll notice.
You know what? One thing that I think I should bring up in your little podcast here, maybe you've looked into this yourself, and we're talking about alien abductions up in Alaska. Those people have gone missing up in Alaska. Some of those people have never been returned. And the same way in New Mexico, you've got people that have gone missing, and some people equate Dulce with all these missing kids in the country. And it's kind of an eerie thought, but one thing that they don't talk about in ufology, and we covered the whole, are these aliens demons? But one thing I don't see discussed, and I think is really taboo even in ufology, and this is an unspeakable. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm going to mention it. Should I mention it? Human mutilation.
Yep.
It happened.
Yep.
It happened, and I don't think they. You can't go around talking about that at alien conferences, because they're going to look at you like, man, this dude's messed up. But you got to look at all the evidence. You've got to look at
cow mutilations, human mutilations, abductions, disappearances, Bigfoot attacks, poltergeists, demonic attacks, demonic possessions. All of that falls into the same category. Truthfully, I think most of what I just said, to a certain degree, is taboo, especially when you're talking with in your own little community, within your own little niche of people. It's taboo. But you know what? It's still a part of it. It still needs to be represented. It still needs to be opened and talked about, because if it's not talked about, we're not going to learn about it. We're not going to understand it. We're not going to understand it whatsoever. If you want
a lot of views on this podcast, put up UFOs and human mutilations. I'm kidding. You'll probably get a lot of people. Checking it out. They'll hear a lot of fluff, and then they'll hear something about human mutilations at the end of the discussion.
So let's talk about one of the oldest UFO cases documented. Let's talk about the Battle of Los Angeles. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I'm gonna claim ignorance there.
You're gonna claim ignorance there? Okay. That was just requested that I ask and see what your thoughts were. I'll summarize it for you if you don't know. I mean, the Battle of LA, they claimed that they had on the radar, they got an airship apparently, and this airship was above LA, and there's actually a picture that was in the LA Times, and they were shooting at it. Well, in the process of shooting this thing, whatever it is, and it's clearly something that's either a UFO or something, but they were stupid. The military pulled the most dumbest maneuver in the world, I think. At that time, what they did is that they're like all trained up, shooting and everything, including artillery shells, everything. They were firing all sorts of things at this flying disc, and nothing brought it down. Well, stupid enough Where does the shells go? Into the houses of the civilians down on the ground. People were actually killed because of the military's stupid mistake by shooting at it and continuing to shoot at it because it stood there for a good while and didn't go down. So if it doesn't go down after a while, don't you want to sit here and say, hey, time to stop because we might be injuring people. The rounds might be bouncing off basically. And then they also had dud. There was one case, it was the UFO was above a certain part where they had a few duds, and literally
Hey, Trent,
these missiles
hold that thought real quick. Hold that thought real quick. Do you recognize this brand?
Yes.
That's New Mexico. We don't have these in Utah.
Yes.
7 to 11. That's the Navajo Nation for you. Just kidding.
Gotta love New Mexico all the way. Gotta love the Southwest. I mean,
I got 2 or 3 of these mugs from New Mexico. I love it over there. You're talking to a Southwest junkie here.
I love the Southwest. It's amazing.
Anyways, back to your story. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just
anyway. Basically, they tried shooting it down. Apparently, it didn't shoot down. There's different stories from there about it, but there was hundreds of people that saw this thing being shot at. There's a big famous picture that the LA Times took a picture of it, and you can actually see the bullets flying, and you can actually see the disc inside of this spotlight. Actually, it's several spotlights, and it's one of the most documented cases that happened because it was just insane.
Like
and then I just saw on your Facebook,
correct?
You're getting, huh?
Kind of like the Phoenix Lights.
Yes, like the Phoenix Lights, basically. The Phoenix Lights is actually the event that actually got me into researching UFOs, researching aliens, and that. And then it went from there to something else, interdimensional beings, which is where I'm at right now. I think that what we're seeing is it's like a pit stop. They come here, grab some stuff, and then they bolt.
They're not always entirely concerned with us, are they?
No, there's some that are. I think there's some that are watching out for us, and I'll throw that out there now. I think there are some that are out there watching out for us.
And to others, we're just an ant pile outside the vehicle. We're just the ant pile.
Yeah, exactly. And then, it's just crazy. So I did see that you have your first guest on Facebook, though. You have your first guest for the UFO Fest, right?
We got like 11 guests for the UFO Fest.
Okay, well, your first big, important, amazing guest.
Listen, I had an event that I planned like a couple of years ago where there was like 3 people that said they were going on an RSVP page on an event page on Facebook. And we had like 300 people there. So I don't put a whole lot of faith into Facebook. I think, if we get 100 people to our event that's truly grassroots, we're kind of doing an event where I'm not motivated by money. I don't know. I know that there's probably a lot of UFO experts that are all about the money. And most of the ones I met at UFO Congress and some of these other conferences, they're not making enough money to even put food on the table. So, I mean, most people are passionate. If they're lucky to make enough money in this field, I mean, all the more to them. But we're doing something here that's truly grassroots. And if we had 50 grand to pay people and fly people into our event, we would do that. But what's important is, whether we have that or not, that we're actually walking the walk here instead of talking the talk. We're putting something together and getting people to come to it. And I think, if you're interested in it and you've had these experiences, you come to something like this and you network with people, and it's just an opportunity for people to get together. And we want ours to be completely inclusive of the general public. So, it's like, let's come out here and have a festival where we talk about everything else in the world besides our Western secular culture. That's what I think this festival is. It's like, this conversation, I really enjoy this conversation with you, Trent, because we're talking about things that I think are important that get brushed the fringe by normal Western culture, you know. And I've taken tours. I've been a tour guide, and I get people from all over Europe coming on my national parks tours, and you know, I get great tips and good tip money. But these people don't even believe in God. They're a complete atheist, and it's like, I don't have a problem with that. If they want to be atheists, that's fine. I've never completely understood atheists.
That question right there. Do you know much about the Brown Mountain Lights in the mountains of North Carolina near Asheville and Boone?
Well, I was traveling. I wasn't in North Carolina, but I did. You know, when I did that Borderlands trip, I was wanting to go up there because I had heard about that region. And sometimes when I visit places, I don't know. You can't come hike. This is going to be I'm going to say something that might sound kind of outlandish to you, but everybody who's gone hiking with me out in the hills or has spent time with me out in the hills, they sooner or later see something strange or have some kind of experience when they're with me. So I always have like a second witness to back up my story, because they say, hey, they experience it too. Go talk to them, you know. But I wanted to go to North Carolina for only that reason, to see if I could see something, just camp out there and see if I could see anything. But I was up in the Smokies, up in northern Alabama, and I was only supposed to go as far as Louisiana, and I ended up driving clear over to Florida on that trip. It was a 14,000-mile trip, and one of these days, what I would like to do is, as a photographer, I would like to travel. I would like to travel up to I had a relative come in the house here. Sorry about that. What I'd like to do maybe in the next year or so is travel up to the Appalachians and start, you know, in the region around Kentucky and Tennessee and, you know, Missouri, and go into those places and go through all those mountains, clear up into Maine. So I want to cover North Carolina, South Carolina, and just network with the people in those areas, because that's a beautiful part of the country. And when I went to the Southern United States for the first time working as a photographer, I was humbled by all the amazing people that I met throughout those regions. It's a very beautiful country. And, you know, I wouldn't doubt anything that's happened in North Carolina up there in the Brown Mountains. I've heard stories about the sightings that people have had and how they're over a century old. And it would be nice. It would be really interesting to talk to people up in that region and get to know them. Just hear their experiences. That's one reason why I'm doing a festival like this, is because I want to talk to other human beings who've had similar experiences. And I think that's where we have a lot of legitimacy, is talking to people who've had their experiences and they're not in it for the money, you know what I'm saying, per case, whatever. So
Yeah. Well, let's see. All right, coming close to an hour and a half. Let's see. What would be a good thing? Last good thing to cover. Save the best for last. Trying to think here. What would be the best thing for last?
You know what? Let me ask.
On a lot of subjects.
I got something interesting I might be able to bring up here. Why is it that every one of these UFO conferences have to have the same exact format? Why don't we have conferences that are looking for new evidence and new witnesses? Why dwell on the same history? I mean, it's significant, but why not?
Why do you think I'm interviewing you? Your point is my point right here, because my point of interviewing these, no offense, this is no offense whatsoever, these lower people, these people that are not known, that need an extra boost. I'm willing to put my reputation out to give a little bit of those people that I deem deservable towards having a good, decent interview and having a good show, having to do with anything and everything, but they're lower on the spectrum. They're not very known. They're either eyewitnesses, they're experiencers, or anything like that.
What does it mean to be known?
Like really known, like like where you can sit there, you're having people like tell you to come to paranormal conferences and stuff like that, that type of thing.
I know. I
Like
mean,
the big
there's
famous
people that want to.
like Christopher St. Booth, Travis, you know, all those different people, you know, these bigger, like known people that aren't me, you, that aren't my buddy, you know, we're sort of on the lower spectrum of knowing each other. We're trying to get our name out at the same time by doing what we do. You're trying to get your name out by doing the UFO conference. You're trying to get some
Actually, I wasn't trying. I've had people
legitimacy.
telling me that. I had people telling me that, but I really wanted to do a conference because I was passionate about the subject and I wanted to meet.
Well, that's what we do. Is that it's not just for us; it's also to get the topic out and discuss it. But in the process, we end up getting our name out anyway because of how good we can turn stuff around. So, you know,
I'm
you
trying
got
to get my
different
name out for my photography. I'm really interested in promoting my photography and saying, "Hey, look at my works. What do you think of that?"
your works are amazing, especially on the most of the stuff on Instagram. I mean, I want to be able to take shots like that. I mean, the stuff that there was one looked like a log cabin and there's just stars like up in the sky. Like, oh my God, that is
That was just
beautiful.
an abandoned house. It was out in the desert, and we illuminated it with a cell phone, and I did a 60-second exposure. I had my buddy walking through the house with a cell phone flashlight.
Oh, nice.
So we were just having fun. If I couldn't have fun doing my photography, I wouldn't be a photographer. I won't
exactly. That's all that
I don't
matters.
like
If we
doing
love what we
weddings or
do,
anything like that. Huh?
exactly. I said if we do what we love doing, like I like to sell comic books out of my house. I like paranormal investigating. I like talking about the topics. That's
Yeah.
why I created the show. I wanted to talk about the subjects, and in the process of interviewing you, I've discovered new things and I learned new things from other people. Like my first show was with a person that owned 500 plus haunted dolls, and that was really an interesting show because I learned a lot about dolls being haunted. I learned like a lot in general that I didn't know about that particular subject.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been a really interesting conversation between the two of us because it's not like your normal off the wall conversation. I mean, hell, we're talking about human mutilation here. I've never met anybody else that wants to publicly mention, and that's it, just mention it, not even really talk about it, because it's sort of like you said, it's taboo to talk about. Just mention it, that it's a topic that is taboo.
If it's out there, it needs to come out.
It does eventually, but people realize that it does happen. And you were talking about human mutilation and stuff. I think it comes down to also doing the implants and stuff. I think that's in the same category as human mutilation, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's some interest building towards that too.
Let me just tell you this. You don't want to get too close to the truth. Because if you get too close to the truth, you know what happens?
You have some men in black show up.
Either that or you don't want to be ruled to suicide with 2 bullet holes to the back of the head.
Yeah.
If you get what I'm saying, I mean, you don't want to know the truth. I don't want to know the truth. I really don't. I know something's there, but I'd rather just have a festival because it's fun.
Exactly.
And
They're the taboo subjects will just like, you know, we'll say, hey, did you hear about this and this, you know, behind everybody's back off of public media.
You know, that's kind of dark humor, you know, bringing up the whole don't go there, you don't want to know the truth. It's kind of dark humor, but there's truth to that, you know. There is. I'm not a paranoid person either.
No, I'm not paranoid either. I know. I've heard way too many stories to say that that's being me paranoid. I'd just rather be safe.
It's the closer you get to the truth, the stranger it gets, and it's hard to even realize it's reality.
Exactly.
Really, you know, and you know, I have roommates that kind of laughed at me because they think I went off the deep end when I had that experience out in Nevada. I was like, oh, he's gone. He's a goner. There he goes down the rabbit hole, you know. But I wouldn't go back. And you know, people were telling me, Nate, your reputation's on the line. this UFO festival doesn't work out. Your reputation is on the line right now. It's like, you know what, dude? My reputation was on the line when I admitted a belief in UFOs, aliens.
Exactly.
My reputation was on the line. So
our reputation is always going to be on the line when we first say, I believe in ghosts, I believe in Bigfoot, I believe in aliens.
Actually, it's gone. Your reputation is gone.
You basically, yeah, exactly. But the only reputation you have is in the paranormal community, and the paranormal community will back you up as long as if you don't, be negative and cause any drama.
Yes, listen, I'm not really plugged into the paranormal community. I've only had my own experiences, and I work as a photographer, and I do consider myself to be a storyteller as well. So I tell people about my experiences, and I'm an interpreter. It's like kind of like a guide. You tell people what you know, and if you don't know what you're talking about, you admit it. You say, "I need to learn more about that." You don't.
Or you just say,
give out false information.
I'm not 100% sure, but this happened to this guy.
Take what I said with a grain of salt. This is what I heard through the grapevine.
And stuff like that, just sort of advise people, be like, I heard this through the grapevine. So-and-so said this to me. I'm not sure if it's true, though. Stuff like that. Like, that's what's funny. And then, it's just really all aspects of the paranormal, no matter what it is, if it's ghosts, anything. I mean, really, it comes down to, it's going to be a touchy subject to the public in general, because they don't.
It's not a touchy subject between us, though.
No,
or anybody who likes this topic.
Anybody that's in the same field as us will not. It's not touchy to them, but it's touchy to the public because they think, oh, he's full of it. But you know what? When it comes down to it, and you were saying earlier, it's not. It's almost like this. The society has become too fake. They haven't. They don't.
It's called secularism.
It's secularism, and it's just become too much, to the point where people start paying attention to the little things more than they should be paying attention to the big things.
See, I started growing a beard because I wanted to become a little more counterculture. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I really enjoyed this conversation with you tonight, Trent. It was a good conversation.
It was definitely.
I don't know if I'd enjoy it or not. It was fun.
Definitely a good conversation. Definitely a good show. It will be posted up on YouTube, so you can share it with your buddies or whatever. And
okay, appreciate it.
I hope you have a great night, and everybody watching, listening, or whatever. Hope you all have a great night, and it's been fun.